Next, from Springfield, we sit down with ABC political analyst Matthew Dowd as he discusses his new book, A New Way, Embracing the Paradox as We Lead and Serve, which explores America's growing political divide and how to solve it. This runs about 10 minutes.
Matthew Dowd, thanks for joining us on the Illinois Channel.
Great to be here.
You recently wrote a book, and there's so much we could talk about, and we'll try to get as much in as we can in a rather limited time. But let's start off with your book. What's the title of the book, and why did you write it?
It's called A New Way, Embracing the Paradox as We Lead and Serve. And the reason I wrote was sort of a plea, actually, to the country and to leaders at all levels that we're in such a disruptive moment where there's great anxiety, great frustration, in some models, great destruction of many of our institutions. But we have to figure out a new way to lead through that. And it's not just designed for sort of Washington. It's really fundamentally designed for people locally to lead our leaders. And so it's written through a series of paradoxes, there's 8 of them, that how we have to figure out a way to balance those paradoxes in leadership models, whether it's for a foundation, a community group, a local legislator, a city, whatever it happens to be, because we're in such an important moment, we have to figure out a way to lead through that. And one of the big things I emphasize is putting country ahead of party.
And that's, I think, a good point, because we see such divisions these days. And we've had divisions in the past, but they seem more pronounced now. Your background, and probably why you wrote the book, but your whole life, in a way, is a transformation and your own journey of going from having been a Democrat and working with Democrats like Lloyd Bentsen in the past, and then you came to work as a political consultant to George W. Bush.
Yes.
And then you eventually kind of split with him.
And now vehement independent. Yes.
Independent. So most people, I think, tend to stick with one party or the other. So having ridden the fence on both sides, what's your, and this goes back to the point of the book, but what do you think when you see so many divisions? You know, just yesterday or this morning, Maxine Waters, the congresswoman from California, was saying, I wouldn't meet with the president. You know, she wants him to be impeached. We hear this hyper-partisanship coming from different sides, both sides. How do you deal with that? I mean, how do you process it yourself?
So I think this is a huge concern for our democracy, and I think the health of our democracy is at stake in this. It's because if you look about the history of democracies in the world, they basically rest on the idea that people have to be able to come out of their tribe and move into the common good, reach consensus, compromise, and do things in the common good. Every single democracy has succeeded, has been able to do that. Every single place that it's failed hasn't been able to come out of their tribe. We are in that tribal nature right now, where the red people are getting redder, the blue people are getting bluer, and there's a huge group of people in the middle that feel totally unrepresented by this sort of back and forward food fight that's going on. And it's causing us to have a great inability to get and solve the big issues of today. Everybody says they agree on infrastructure. We can't get anybody to get together on. Everybody says they agree on tax reform. We can't get anybody to get together. Everybody says they agree on making the healthcare system more efficient. We can't seem to get together on that. And so I think we're in a moment, and I think it happens. It's happened a few times in our country's history, not in our lifetime, but in our country's history. And I was reflecting on, I went to the Lincoln Museum here in Springfield today, and I was reflecting on this. One of the times in our country's history was in the midst of the Civil War, and when we moved from an agrarian-based economy to an industrial-based economy. We are in that exact same moment where there's this huge battle going on, and we're looking for people that can lead us through that and say, put your party behind and come together for the common good.
And I don't know the extent to which you pay attention to Illinois state politics, but boy, the division's here. You know, we're the only state in the nation without a budget, and we have a governor and a House Speaker who are, let's say, equally powerful and are unwilling, they wouldn't say this publicly, but they're unwilling to work with each other, and so here we sit without a budget.
Well, it's a virus that started in Washington and is spreading throughout the country. And so it used to be the federal government doesn't know what they're doing. And then now it's sort of drifted out to many state governments, which have become equally as polarized and equally as divisive. There is still one level of government that's trusted, fundamentally trusted in our country, and that is local government, because people can see, feel, and touch it. And it's there and it's in their lives. But almost every other level of government, federal, state, they trust the state a little bit more so than the federal, but it's going across the country. And we have to figure out, as Americans, how do we stop this and go back to the model that really the founders of our country talked about. One of the biggest things our founders of our country warned against, and George Washington did it in his farewell address, was partisanship and hyper-partisanship. There's not one mention of political party in the U.S. Constitution or the Declaration of Independence. But now it seems if you put a jersey on, it doesn't matter what your side does, you're incapable of criticizing them. And it doesn't matter what the other side does, you're incapable of praising them for something good they did. And that doesn't work in a democracy.
You know, on one hand, I want to say, so what's the answer? On the other hand, just as a follow-up to what you just said, I thought it was interesting that in the recent healthcare initial first-stage failure, that you had members of the Republican Party in the House opposing their House Speaker and their President, which is interesting that it wasn't just let's go for the jersey and pass it on a party, but that they, for their own reasons, divided. But if you want to address that, but also what do we do about it? How do we overcome these divisions? And to what extent would you say we the people are the problem, that the politicians are a reflection of we the people and our own partisanship?
So I'll take it from the end. So the broad thing is that in the end, we have to lead our leaders. Leaders in Washington don't lead. They follow, and they figure out where the country wants to go, or they figure out the aspirations and dreams of the country and where they fundamentally want to move. And then the best leaders get about a half a step in front of where the country already wants to go. And so I think it's absolutely true that it is not going to change until we change. It is not going to change until we stop in our lives. We stop being divisive, and we start gathering information. One of the biggest problems is we have no common set of facts, right? Everybody has their set of facts, and if you have 2, 3, 4, 5 sets of facts, you can't come together. You can come together if you have opinions, but you can't come together with a common set of facts. A huge part of the problem is because people in their lives are accessing information which confirms their own biases. So conservatives and Republicans watch Fox and listen to certain radio programs and read certain blogs and go on certain websites. Democrats and liberals do the same thing. They watch MSNBC, they read certain blogs, they listen to certain radio stations, and it confirms their existing biases and prejudices. We have to break out of that. We have to access information and look for information and try to come to some agreement in our community. And when that happens, this is what I think is going to happen, and which it always does, is it builds in around the country in places like Springfield or Chicago or Austin, Texas or Boise, Idaho, and it builds, and then finally our leaders recognize it, or our leaders emerge that recognize it and then are able to move it in a constructive manner. But we have to change before they change.
And on the other hand, I'm somewhat always surprised at how dynamic the nation is. And I remember growing up in the 60s, the transformation of the civil rights movement and how attitudes changed. We've similarly had quite a change as far as how we view the homosexual movement.
Marriage.
And marriage, and now transgender. And I think the American people we move so fast, in many cases shockingly fast, that we are a dynamic society and fairly accepting after we kind of blow off some steam.
But we have to, I think one of the things, and I think that's a really good point, one of the things we have to recognize is that change sometimes moves faster than some people are able to navigate, right? And I think for a lot of people in the country, the change of the culture, the change of the economy, all of these are sort of shifting big, huge plates that are going on in our country. Donald Trump, everybody talks about, Donald Trump isn't the catalyst for the change. Donald Trump is a result of all of this change. And I think there's a group of people in the country that say, whoa, 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 it's moved too fast. I want to go back to the way it was, or the way my father or mother, the job they had, or the communities, the way they looked like this, or my schools, the way they were this. And so I think it requires, and I think a missing part of this on both sides of this, is there's an empathy gap. Right? There's an inability to see where other people are in their lives, what fears they have.
See people as enemy rather than understanding.
And meeting them and sort of understanding their fear, and not saying hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, why don't you come along, but understand where they are and allow people to go along on a timetable. As you say, in our history, change has occurred. We've had a lot of change. But the best people involved and leaders involved are able to sort of understand those people's fears and help people move along to the transformation that ultimately will come. But we have to give people a chance to catch up to all this change.
Our time is limited, so let me close out with this. As you are here in Springfield as we tape just to address the Manufacturers and Retailers Association, part of your job, how much speaking do you do around the country? And when you speak to a group like this today, how do you decide what message you want to impart on?
So I probably give, I would say, 15 or 16 speeches around the country. Usually people bring me in to sort of understand the politics of the day because of my job at ABC News. Today I'm going to talk about somewhat from my book, but how much of responsibility and accountability people like here in Springfield, Illinois, have a responsibility. We can't say, why won't the president do this, or I love when the president does this, and they're the ones, that's the one that we're going to put all our power into some higher authority distant from here. Is to embrace their responsibility of the change they can do. The interesting thing about the business community, which I'll say today, is the business community is really beginning to be on the cutting edge of the change in our country. It normally was politicians pushed the business community in a certain way. Now, if you look around things that have happened, the business community is really leading on a lot of the issues, and I would say to them to keep pushing them on that. Be the leaders, don't wait for somebody else.
Matthew Dowd, we could talk longer, but time is short, so we appreciate you joining.
Great to be here. Thank you.